Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. I'm Dr. Daniel Amen.
And I'm Tana Amen. Here we teach you how to win the fight for your brain to defeat anxiety, depression, memory loss, ADHD, and addictions.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is brought to you by Amen Clinics, where we've transformed lives for 3 decades using brain SPECT imaging to better target treatment and natural ways to heal the brain. For more information, visit amenclinics.com.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is also brought to you by BrainMD, where we produce the highest quality nutraceutical products to support the health of your brain and body. For more information, visit brainmdhealth.com. Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. And stay tuned for a special code for a discount to Amen Clinics for a full evaluation, as well as any of our supplements at brainmdhealth.com.
Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a very controversial subject and one that has tormented a lot of people, both from people who struggle with this and people who love them. We're going to talk about borderline personality disorder. Often people who really struggle in relationships.
So I have a story about this, actually. I actually didn't know anything about borderline personality. And long before I met you, I went out with someone who I thought I kind of liked. It didn't go very far, though, because this person was so traumatized by someone that he went out with who he said was borderline, and he didn't know she was borderline. And he began to tell me all about how crazy this person was and made his life. This person made his life just like hell and crazy, and was like, and he asked me, he's like, "Are you borderline?" And I'm like, how do you even answer that? Like, I was like so stunned. But I realized he was so traumatized and he had such PTSD from this whole experience that nothing was ever going to come of this situation. So it just sort of ended before it started. He just couldn't trust anybody. So is that normal for someone who's ever gone out with someone with borderline personality?
It's a nightmare.
Okay.
I mean, dating them, living with them, having them work with you, it's a nightmare for them, but it's also a nightmare for the people who are around them.
Now,
let me talk about the 10 most common signs of borderline personality. Okay. So one is impulsive and risky behavior, such as risky driving, unsafe sex, gambling sprees, or illegal drug abuse. So that's just one. So impulsivity and risky behavior. 2, awareness of self-destructive behavior, including self-injury, but often feeling unable to change it.
So self-injury like cutting?
Like cutting.
Okay.
Burning yourself, asphyxiation, choking yourself. Wide mood swings is number 3. 4 is short but intense episodes of anxiety or depression. 5, very common, inappropriate anger and antagonistic behavior, sometimes escalating into physical fights, not associated with drugs or alcohol. 6, difficulty controlling emotions. 7, suicidal behavior. 8, feeling misunderstood, neglected, alone, empty, very common, or hopeless. 9, fear of being alone. I hate you, please don't leave me.
Right.
10, feelings of self-hate and self-loathing. I often will begin to suspect it in the office. If someone tells me after meeting me for 20 minutes, you're the best psychiatrist that ever lived, because I know usually in about 3 sessions, they're going to say, you're the worst psychiatrist that ever lived. So they tend to overvalue
and then undervalue.
So
I have a question. I'm assuming there's also a continuum. Not everyone is like to a 10 on this scale, and not everyone's a 0.
Right. And just so people know, the term borderline actually came because psychiatrists were having trouble is this a psychotic disorder where people lose touch with reality, or is this a personality disorder? And it's sort of on the border of those, where sometimes their behavior is so irrational that you wonder if they're not going.
Well, I've known someone who has, in my mind, all 10 of those traits. And it's really hard to get through to someone when they're in one of their episodes. So what causes it?
So there are a lot of theories about it, that early abandonment, very early trauma,
So
sexual
emotional
trauma,
or okay.
physical trauma, almost always early either abandonment or trauma. When I actually don't like giving people this diagnosis. I do it very rarely because for therapists, when they're dealing with someone who has borderline personality disorder, they'll often give people that diagnosis when they know they're not going to get better. And so
it
they
makes them
justify
right.
that, well, it's not my fault as a therapist that you're not getting better. It's your fault because it's your character. It's your personality. So here at Amen Clinics, we actually very rarely give people personality disorder diagnoses because that doesn't really honor the brain.
But what does that mean? When you say you rarely give it, is that because you're saying that personality disorders rarely get better?
That I would much rather see this from a brain perspective.
Okay.
And what I often see is they have abnormalities in their left temporal lobe, which go along with violence and the irritability and the dark negative thoughts. They often have low frontal lobe function, which goes with the impulsivity and the risky, excitement-seeking behavior. And they often have high activity in their cingulate gyrus, which we've talked about. It's where they get stuck. You're the best person, and now you're the worst person. And these people can actually become stalkers. And so I'm often thinking.
The couple that I've known of also, like, sex addiction was huge. So is that a common thing?
Common.
Okay.
And if you think of our sex addicts, that they have compulsivity and impulsivity at the same time. Mm-hmm. So they're impulsive and compulsive. And so for me, I'll use either medicine or supplements to raise both serotonin and dopamine. Raising serotonin helps the compulsivity. Raising dopamine helps the impulsivity. I'll often use a mood stabilizer as well, something like Neurontin or Lamictal, to help decrease the rages. And to me, I've found when I balance their brain and then teach them how to manage their stress in their relationships, they do so much better. And so I actually got to debate Otto Kernberg, who's probably, people think of him as the founder of borderline personality disorder and psychoanalytic theory. And I'm like, we should be looking at their brains, because how do you know they didn't have a brain injury? Or how do you know they don't have Lyme disease? Yeah, that's my question.
How does it start?
Because, if you have a brain injury, can totally make you look.
That's my question.
We saw a movie last night that we loved, I Can Only Imagine, about the
so good
origin of this Christian song by Mercy Me. And the movie was just beautiful. But he
lived in a lot of trauma.
But Bart, the main character, was raised by a severely abusive father who beat him and whose mother left. And so Bart was abandoned, Bart was abused. Bart didn't have borderline personality disorder. He was traumatized. And then as you looked at the dad, the movie really early on centers around football. And the dad, I guess, played in college and was really good. And I'm watching the movie going, the dad has CTE.
I know, and I'm getting mad at you.
The dad has chronic traumatic encephalopathy from the repetitive hits to his head, which makes him ineffective at work with his family. And Jesus ends up saving him and transforms his life. And it's like, you're like, how can Jesus fix CTE?
If he had CTE, no, that's not what I said. You said that. I said if it were CTE, he wouldn't all of a sudden, for the last part of his life, become this amazing person.
See, I went to Oral Roberts University. So
I went to Loma Linda. So
totally
same thing.
Believe in prayer.
Same thing, I do
healing.
Too. I'm just saying CTE, you don't usually see reverse that radically.
But what do we always talk about? that there are four main circles of illness, right? They're biological, so trauma. They're psychological, the trauma that Bart was raised in, and probably the dad. Social, you're really struggling in your marriage, you're struggling at work, you're struggling to be a good dad or a good kid. And spiritual. And often we find when people find their purpose, when they get connected to God, their community, their deepest sense of meaning and purpose, even if they have bad biology, it gets better. And one of my favorite stories is about Byron Katie, who's a friend of ours.
She certainly would have demonstrated a lot of this.
She was a rager. She would have totally demonstrated borderline personality. She was an addict. She was a rager. She had eating disorder.
Behavior,
she
right.
was self-destructive. But she has this epiphany, which is really a spiritual experience. She wakes up on the floor of a halfway house.
With a cockroach crawling across her foot.
And realizes when she believes her thoughts, she suffers. And when she doesn't believe her thoughts, she doesn't
Because her thoughts
suffer.
were awful.
And when we became friends, because her book was so helpful to me, we're actually published by the same imprint at Random House. And so I got to meet her. And she came and got scanned. She had the brain of a murderer. I said, oh, by the way, if you murder someone, I can help get you off. But she was
terrible.
the most peaceful person.
Yeah.
Right? So when you think about the transformation, don't forget that having a deep sense of meaning and purpose can help you feel better.
Okay, so my question is, so let's just say you didn't experience all of that in childhood, but can experiencing like massive major stress later in life or some sort of emotional trauma later in life trigger that kind of behavior? Or can an infection or a head injury later in life?
Yes,
Okay.
especially if the stresses stack.
Okay.
So,
Which means that there is hope that you can be helped.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But if the stresses stack, you lose your job, you lose your marriage, you've
Your
had
home.
a car accident, your child, you have an autistic child, these start stacking, your behavior is much more likely to get out of
Erratic and
more erratic. And there's hope. You have to just deal with each of these.
and then you can balance that
And
behavior.
then you can balance your
So
behavior.
I would like to do another podcast on this because I think we should talk about people who love people with these personality issues.
Stay tuned. Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.